Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
A science story, huh?
These NYU scientists,
I felt
right.
I was so
And I just thought,
happy.
well,
I had figured it out.
It was that golden moment.
Because science was on my side.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Story Collider, where true personal stories about science help us to discover how weird and wonderful it is to exist in this world and be a human. I'm your host, Misha Gajewski, and today's episode is all about what happens when religious beliefs collide, and how science can play a part in bridging conflicting beliefs together. Our first story is from neuroscientist Lauren Vetere. Her story was recorded at QED Astoria in Queens, New York, and is a perfect example of good intentions going sideways. And then, when Lauren doesn't know how to get things back on track, I can totally relate to that awkward feeling. You're going to love this story. Here's Lauren.
As a kid, I knew that my mom was Jewish and my dad was Catholic, and that meant that they disagreed on something, but I wasn't totally clear on what that was. Bacon, mostly? And I remember coming home one day from school in middle school, and my mom asked me if I wanted to have a bat mitzvah or a confirmation, the Jewish and Catholic coming-of-age rites, respectively. And I thought, choose between my parents? No, thank you. And a big party? Well, what if I forget to invite someone and they get mad? Or what if my friends don't all get along? Pass. As a kid, this whole thing was a little bit of an identity crisis, but later on, it became a useful perspective to me, this in-betweenness. I think it made me more thoughtful and curious about the ways that different belief systems intersect, and curious about why people believe what they do. In college, in my sophomore year, I remember sitting on my bed in my first grown-up apartment and opening an email that said, "Do you like learning about different belief systems? Do you want to bridge gaps between people? Well, then apply to our new student organization." And I thought, ooh, is this for me? And so I went to this first club meeting and I sat in the back of this old classroom listening to students who identified as Christian, Jewish, atheist, Muslim, some other things I'd never heard of. And they were all talking about how their different upbringings influence the way they move through the world. And I was having so much fun getting to know these people and scheming about ways to make our college campus more inclusive. Now, if this sounds a little too good to be true, I should mention that this is a unique moment in time, the years around 2014, 2015, when in hindsight, it feels like the biggest debate was about whether a dress was gold or black. And this was in Florida, surprisingly, where I grew up and went to college, but before the recent Florida government decision to essentially cut funding to all diversity and inclusion initiatives. But anyway, a few months go by, and I'm rushing from my last class of the day to get to this event that I've been helping plan. And the goal of this event is to bring students from different religious and non-religious backgrounds together to learn about each other and build community. And so I'm sweating as I rush into the cold AC of this rec room that we've reserved. And I go to the back of the room to huddle up with my co-organizers. I've made it in just as we're about to start. And I briefly think that maybe someone should say something to set some ground rules before we start, but no one does. And I'm not technically in charge, and I don't want to offend anyone by implying that we're not all here to have a good time. So I let it go. I really want this to go well. And I believe that it will. And part of that is because I know that my parents agreed on most things despite their different outlooks on the world. and also because of my new passion at the time, which was neuroscience and psychology. So a few weeks before this, I'd made a PowerPoint for fun about some cool new survey data I'd seen. And so basically, people were asked to rate how they felt about different religious groups on a numerical scale, and they tended to rate a group more positively if they knew someone who was part of that group. Makes sense. And this also aligned with a study I'd read about in one of my neuroscience classes. So even a rat, these researchers found, is more likely to help another rat get out of a trap if that rat is of the same strain as a rat they've met before. So strains in rats are kind of like dog breeds. They look and act a little bit different, but they're all the same species. So all this is to say, we don't know if animals experience empathy or how they experience it, but even a rat will help out another rat given the right set of experiences and circumstances. So I think, well, we're going to bring students together from different backgrounds and walks of life who otherwise never would have met on this 60,000 person college campus. Obviously a great idea. World peace. Here we come. So the event's ready to go. We have these tables set up in a big circle in this rec room. And at each table, there are students from a different student organization representing a different belief system. And we have a bunch of students in attendance, and some local religious community leaders have shown up too. And the idea is that people will be able to go around and have brief conversations with each table, sort of like speed dating, but with a little bit of learning. And so we start off by having each group just give a brief introduction, who they are, what they're representing. And a few tables in, we get to the far end of the room, and a girl from the next group steps forward. And she's not someone that I know, just another college-age girl with curly brown hair, kind of looked a little like me in hindsight. And she's got kind of a serious expression on her face. And then she gets up onto a chair, which is weird, but okay. And then she opens her mouth, and my brain short circuits a little bit after that, because she's raising her voice, she's taking kind of an aggressive tone, and telling the room what they must do. And she's implying that her way of seeing the world is the right way and the best way, and you can feel the tension in the room. And I'm turning to my co-organizers, and they're looking at me wide-eyed, as I'm sure I am looking wide-eyed at them, and none of us know what to do. And the room is so silent apart from this one girl talking. And all I can think as my heart is racing is, how do we get her to stop? Was this whole event a terrible idea? What are we going to do? I'm completely at a loss. And so I think, okay, well, she's about to stop talking soon. She must be almost done. But as I think that, she just keeps talking. So a few minutes into this, one of the few real adults in the room comes up to our little huddle and whispers, "Hey, would you like me to say a few words before we move on?" And I don't really know this guy either. He's in his 30s or 40s, looks like. He's got dad vibes and kind eyes, though. And I briefly am aware that he's probably one of the local community leaders with one of the tables. And I don't know if this is a good idea. At this point, letting another stranger take the floor seems like it could be a little risky. But at the same time, it can't get much worse, right? So I don't know exactly what this guy is planning to say, and I don't know if it'll be enough. But he has come up and offered to help. And in that offer, I think I recognize something familiar. And maybe that's a curiosity, a desire for connection, maybe a belief that we're not all so different. And so inside, I'm thinking, oh my God, we're so not equipped for this. Please help us. But outwardly, I say, yes, thank you so much. That would be great. And so finally, this girl steps down from the chair, and this brave man steps out into the center of this silent and bewildered room and says in a very non-accusatory way, "Hi, everyone. So glad that you're here. I just wanted to remind everyone that we're here not to convince other people of our perspective, but to learn about perspectives that might be different from our own. And to my surprise, no one walked out. I got to go around the room, continue the event as planned, get to talk to all these cool people, and ask them my favorite question to ask at these kind of events, which was, what misconceptions do you feel like people have about you based on the group that you're from? And people always had some really good answers ready to go. Back then, my strategy for peacekeeping was to avoid conflict altogether. But in this case, potentially the only way to avoid those mortifying few minutes would have been to not hold the event at all. And I would have missed out on so many connections that way, so many opportunities for empathy. And so now maybe I try to channel that guy when I know I might need to navigate a potentially difficult conversation. But it also helps me to remind myself that some conversations are worth having and some stories are worth telling, even if they might be a little uncomfortable. Thank you.
That was Lauren. To learn more about her, visit our website, storyclatter.org. Also, just a reminder, we still need your help picking the storytellers for our 15-year anniversary celebration. Voting closes on March 31st, but there's still time to vote for your all-time favorite Storyclatter storytellers. The 5 most voted storytellers will be flown to New York City to perform live at our 15-year anniversary celebration on June 3rd at Caveat. Visit our website, storyclatter.org, right now to vote. And if you want to help us out even more, please donate to the Storyclatter at storyclatter.org/donate. Right now, the voices of scientists and science communicators need to be heard more than ever. At Storyclatter, we believe that personal stories can cut through the noise, connecting people to the human side of science, building trust, and making complex issues real. But we can't do this work without you. If you believe in the power these stories have and this mission, please donate to the Storyclatter at storyclatter.org/donate. The most popular level is $10 a month, and you can make your tax-deductible donation at storyclatter.org/donate. But really, any level makes a difference, and we're so grateful to everyone who supports Storyclatter.
Your data is like gold to hackers. They're selling your passwords, bank details, and private messages. McAfee helps stop them. Secure VPN keeps your online activity private. AI-powered text scam detector spots phishing attempts instantly. And with award-winning antivirus, you get top-tier hacker protection. Plus, you'll get up to $2 million in identity theft coverage, all for just $39.99 for your first year. Visit McAfee.com. Cancel anytime. Terms apply.
ID Tech, the first and most trusted tech camp, is where kids ages 7 to 17 find their people, the coding and creating people, the fire-breathing, shell-spinning BattleBots people, the just as happy building games as they are playing them people. At 75 prestigious college campuses all across the country, ID Tech features over 50 epic courses like BattleBots, AI and machine learning, game design, and more. Visit idtech.com and use code IDTech to save $150 on a week that's guaranteed to be a highlight of summer.
Our next story is from Executive Director of the NC State Genetics and Genomics Academy, Fred Gould. His story was recorded at the NC State University last year as part of a show we did with NCSU's Genetics and Genomics Academy. Fred's story is an incredible journey of doubt, discovery, and self-reinvention that you can't help but be drawn in and wonder, how did a devout Jewish boy end up teaching evolutionary biology? Here's Fred.
So when I was young, I wasn't a good student, but I had a powerful, personal God. I remember in 4th and 5th grade, walking away from school, looking down at the cracks in the New York City sidewalk while praying to God to please erase the pencil marks I had put on my exam and move them to the correct place. My God really did that kind of thing. So when I was growing up, I heard lots of stories about how my parents' families had fled to the United States from the pogroms against Jews in Eastern Europe in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. If you've ever seen the movie Fiddler on the Roof, anybody? Yeah? You can picture that scene. Around the kitchen table, my parents would tell tall tales, I think, about their time growing up on the Lower East Side of New York City among the other immigrant children. I pictured them as characters in the then very popular show, The Little Rascals. But it wasn't all great. My grandfather, who couldn't speak English, lost his leg working in a garment factory, and the family was evicted and thrown out on the street at least once. My mom and dad worked their way into the middle class, and my father changed his name from Gould to Gould, that's why you're hearing me Gould, Fred Gould, to avoid anti-Semitism against his business. So they put me in a very religious school for middle school and for elementary and middle school, where I prayed 3 times a day. In my prayer group, when one of the rabbis would roll up his sleeve to put on his leather prayer straps, I'd secretly stare sometimes at the tattoo on his arm. It was kind of blurry, but I could make out some of the numbers that had been inked into his skin in the Nazi concentration camps. I was always amazed that this person's journey through the horrors of the Holocaust, he came out of that devoted to his God, to his personal God. As I moved on, and I wanted to say that he and others taught me the mantra that we were the chosen people, and that if God willed it, there was a reason, even if it was horrible, even if we didn't understand it. And I understood that mantra. And as I moved on into middle school, I became more and more of a Jewish fundamentalist. And I would wear my religious garments outwardly, even though I sometimes worried that I'd get beat up going to school. So this was an important time in my life. And my rabbis realized that I was so sincerely devout, and they sort of tried to prevail on me to continue my religious education and become a rabbi like themselves. My father at first really rewarded my devoutness, but then worried that I was becoming too religious. And he actually basically jerked me out of the religious school and had me go to a public high school. I protested this, but I know that deep inside, I was somewhat relieved because I didn't think I'd be smart enough to become a rabbi. So through public high school, I prayed 3 times a day, and that continued as I started my first year in a commuter college that was about 2 miles from my home. And as a first-generation college student, I really wanted to please my parents and their ideas for my future. And so I became a pre-med student. But even pre-med students have to take English literature courses. And so I did. And just by chance, the instructor that I got for this English class specialized in existential literature. I met Kafka and Camus and Sartre, and it shook me. That godless world was incredible to me. But I also was introduced to Martin Buber. He was a Jewish religious existentialist, and that really appealed to me until I read his works and realized that his God was radically different from my own. His was a God that I couldn't please by memorizing and reciting prayers. these authors really called on you to either make peace with an absurd, meaningless world, pretty tough, or to embrace a God that you had to create yourself. So I remember sitting in my bedroom in my parents' house, trying to reconcile for myself this crazy new world. You know, how could it be that there is no heaven and no world to come? You know, do we all just die like worms? You know, this was really shocking to me. I finally decided to talk to my father about this, but it went nowhere. And in the end, he told me that I needed to go and see the rabbi of our synagogue. So I walked to the synagogue and into my rabbi's study with this hope. I had it in my head that he would say something like, "Fred, the God that you grew up with was a God for children. Now you're ready for a deeper religion." But that didn't happen. He talked around what I was telling him and gave me what felt like hollow advice. He pulled a few books off his bookshelf. I remember it. I took them home hoping there would be something in them, but there was nothing. So at that point, there was no way for me to go back. That was the day that my powerful personal God disappeared. I never told my father about my disappointment in the rabbi. I continued actually to pray once a day so my father wouldn't worry about me. And I also went to the synagogue on Saturdays with my family, where I would actually think about Buber and Buber's God. Unfortunately, the God of Martin Buber didn't work for me, so I was left with the atheists and the agnostics. This was the era of the Vietnam War, and I slowly morphed into an anti-war hippie. Yep, I went to all the nonviolent protests trying not to get arrested because that would mean no medical school for me. So I lived in these two worlds, right? And the university, all of these students smoking dope and facing off against the cops, and then going home and praying and going to the synagogue. In the end, I did apply to medical school and I got in, but decided not to go. My father and many of you who are parents he thought I was crazy not to take on the financial stability, right, from an immigrant family and all of the honor of being a doctor. Boy, he really let me know this. Yeah, you can imagine. And then I started driving a cab in New York City and saved up money and went to Europe and roamed around. I had some happy times and I learned a lot, but in my gut, I sometimes really felt like I should have listened to my dad and taken on the security blanket of med school. So there I was, no God, no med school. I was pretty much adrift. So I found myself singing this song about a journey by the band America that's called A Horse with No Name. All right? I'm not going to sing it. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name because it's good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name because there ain't no one for to give you no fame. That pretty much summed up where I was. I was in a new, free, and vulnerable world. So when I came back to the United States, I wound up driving a cab again and doing odd jobs that weren't very fulfilling. And a friend told me one day that I could go to graduate school to study nature and they would pay me. And it'll take me another 10 minutes to explain to you what the difference was between hearing those words, they would pay me to learn about nature, and my becoming an evolutionary biologist and a professor, as you heard, at NC State. But suffice it to say that my journey had taken me from this sort of prepared and cloistered religious world to this desert with no name. And I made a compromise, because academia was my compromise, where you do get a name and you do get a chance at fame. So it's somewhere in between those things. And that has worked for me. Everybody has their own journey. That one is where I wound up. And so at NC State, I encounter religious students who take evolutionary biology as if it's as expected as going to football games. And then on breaks and in the summers, they go back to their religious communities. They live in two worlds like I did. And I feel real empathy for them and their journeys and their struggles. And so I've always hoped that I could do something to be helpful. So when Mary Kath Cunningham, who's sitting here, invited me to teach lectures in evolutionary biology to her course, Darwinism and Christianity, I jumped at the opportunity, and I've been doing it for many years. The premise of this course is that you can have Darwinism and religion. And it's a great course, and I wish I had it when I was going to school. But one thing it can't give you is it can't give you a God who will change the grade on your exams or, more seriously, heal your dying mother. So I don't know if there really is a way to give true solace to students who find themselves in the place that I was when I was a first-year student in college. But I realize maybe that's the whole idea of college, right? The real college is to be faced with new ideas and viewpoints and new information that really challenge your core. And then you have to go on your own personal journey that may lead you to some new change or may lead you back to the old perspective. It's your journey. And I think about the tattoo on the arm of my rabbi. He had gone on his journey through the horrors of the Holocaust and come out worshiping his own personal God. So I would respect a student who took evolutionary biology and then thoughtfully decided to push away the idea of natural selection in favor of a personal God. What's really important is the depth of the journey, not really just the outcome. So I want to say that teaching evolutionary biology, and some of you do that, is different from teaching math or chemistry. Sure, we have the facts, but 25 to 50% of Americans don't believe in the idea of evolution. And those percentages are higher for the families of first-generation college students and the families of underrepresented minority students. So when I look out on the faces of the students in my classes, I realize that it's not my place, not my task to sort of guide them on their journey, but it's what my job is to let them know that I respect their sincere struggles wherever it'll take them. Thank you.
That was Fred. To learn more about him, visit our website, storyclatter.org. Our website is just one way to connect with Storyclatter, but there are so many other ways, and we hope you'll use them all. You can always follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Head to storyclatter.org to become a financial supporter, or if you want to come to one of our shows, start your own Storyclatter show in your community, or even learn how to tell your own science story, you can learn all about that on our website too. This podcast is produced by me, Misha Gajewski, along with Jen Chen, Nikisha Roberts-Washington, and Aaron Barker, Executive Director and co-founder of the Storyclatter. The stories featured in today's episode were produced by Tracy Segarra, Grant Bowen, Kelly Vinyl, and Jitesh Jaggi. Special thanks goes out to Storyclatter's board and team. Our theme music is by Ghost, and next week we'll be back with stories about struggling to find the right words. They're beautiful and will probably make you cry. You don't want to miss it. Until next time, thanks so much for listening.